Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Psychic Diaries. I'm Michael Lamport, and I'm the producer of the paranormal show Rescue Mediums. And along with me on this particular adventure is Jackie Dennison, who is a psychic and one of the hosts of Rescue Mediums. Now, today on Psychic Diaries, we have the absolute pleasure of talking to Paul Ceselle. Paul is a man of many, many talents. He is a psychic. He's a paranormal investigator. He's a tutor and so many other things. And he's been involved in TV, film, and theater, which is interesting because I've been involved in TV, film, and theater too. But today on Psychic Diaries, we're going to see what Paul has to tell us about himself. His great-grandmother apparently was a medium, and it looks like she may have passed her abilities on to her grandson. So, Paul, I just thank you so much for agreeing to come on first.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Can you tell us, when was your first awareness of spirit or spirit activity? How old were you, do you know?
Well, whenever anybody asks me that question, I go back to kind of what my mum told me. So I don't have an awareness of when my first encounter was. However, she said after giving birth to me, she brought me home from the hospital, and she said, prior to that, the house had always been nice and quiet, still, peaceful, lovely little home to live in. And then she brought me home, and all of these weird, spooky things started to happen. And gradually over time, they sort of built up, and it kind of went from there. So I guess you could say from birth, really.
Well, yeah, I guess that's better than being a baby and coming home and crying all the time.
Well, yeah, I think I did that as well, though.
Was your great-grandma still alive when you were born, Paul?
You're pushing my memory a little bit. I think I think it hadn't been too long since she'd passed over. So yeah. I may have met her, but I wouldn't have a recollection of that at all.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking is I would imagine she would have been the one of the ones that was there to welcome you in as a baby. She would probably, yes, I've got somebody I can teach now.
I'm sure. Yeah, maybe from spirit. Maybe she from spirit.
From spirit side, yeah, absolutely. From spirit side, she'd be going, yes, this is so good.
Absolutely.
And Paul, as to the many things that you've done, and I should tell the audience that Paul is also an avid dog lover, which is great.
Yeah.
And but I guess the main question I want to ask you, only because I love the history of it, is Dracula's castle.
Oh wow, yeah.
You were in there, were you not?
Yeah, so a few years back, I was asked by an events company if I would go out with them to Transylvania in Romania. They were taking a group of people from all over the world on a paranormal expedition to Dracula's castle. So naturally, I kind of went, yeah, of course I'm going to come. And so off we went. So yeah, an amazing experience, but not what I thought it would be. It was completely different.
What do you mean?
Well, we here in the West, we kind of romanticize over vampires, don't we? And Dracula being in the haunted castle. So if you go to Transylvania, it's like you going up this mountain, and it takes 2 hours to get up there, and it's very much as you picture it in the Hollywood movies of going up the mountain and seeing the castle perched right at the top. And the night that we went, of all things, we had a major thunderstorm. So the lightning was coming down, the thunder. You couldn't have wanted a better scene for it, you know, as you're coming up to the castle. But and the other thing, bats. Yes, thousands of bats all over the castle, you know, in the trees all around. Yeah, it was amazing. The bats were like just everywhere.
Did you feel any sort of, not necessarily Dracula, but any sort of spirit feeling from the building?
That was the amazing thing, is that the building, the castle itself, despite having a torture chamber in there, with all of the artifacts and the devices that they would have used, so the stretching racks and the body armor where they would have closed the doors with all the spikes on, despite all of that being in there, and much of it, you know, being, you know, having been in the castle itself felt very calm. There was very little, in my opinion anyway, there was very little paranormal activity within the castle. You know, which you might think, well, there should be, but our Romanian guide was telling us that that the castle really wasn't used as a prison or a place of torture, or a place of death. And he said that there are other places in Romania that are far more macabre and sinister than, you know, Bram Stoker's castle. So yeah, lovely, lovely place to go to. However, it didn't have the atmosphere that you was expecting. The twist to that, though, is that before Bram Stoker came along to write about Dracula, and yes, he did stay in the castle, and that's where he did start to write the story of Dracula. The whole area is surrounded by woodland within the Transylvanian mountains, and the locals strongly believed in forest spirits. So they believed in these dark entities that would move through the forest at night, and would take possession of their souls, possession of their bodies. And so what the locals would do, pretty much like our Halloween, was they created these masks made of wood that were quite grotesque, and you can actually buy them. They still carve them today, and you put the mask on and it would, you know, trick the malevolent spirit into believing that you was a malevolent spirit or a demon, along those lines, and it would leave you alone. So the locals have a completely different belief system to what we have when we think of Transylvania.
Well, I think that's great, because I mean, I would not like to come across a dark woodland spirit.
No.
But I guess when these people have their masks on, that could be pretty scary too.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about, you know, the story of the locals and how they're extremely superstitious of these, whether they are nature spirits or more malevolent spirits that roam the forest at night, you know, could that be part of the Dracula myth, you know, where it's not about a man, but actually these spirits that are haunting and plaguing the locals, as opposed to, and the villagers, as opposed to a man himself? You know, you don't know. It's only when you start to hear these stories that you see maybe a slightly different twist to the Dracula legend itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating twist, though, isn't it? I mean, that's a whole different thing, because, you know,
absolutely.
We all think of Dracula as, what is the one famous saying he says in the play, and I think in the movies? They ask him if he wants a glass of wine, and Dracula says, "No, thank you. I never drink wine." He's always got that big pause.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you want to see bats in their thousands, go to Transylvania. They have them.
All atmospheric. You know, interesting that you would say about there being like a sort of a flat energy after the build-up, that you go to somewhere, because that can happen. I mean, that is reality, isn't it? You go on a psychic investigation and you can't guarantee that, you know, spirit are going to be there, whether or not other people have experienced them. And I think this is one of the problems when there are organized ghost hunts, for want of a better word, or, you know, people expect something and it's like, well, what's going to happen? And honest people like yourself will go in there and say, well, actually, there's not really, the energy is quite nice there, which is exactly what you should do. You know, don't make it fit, which unfortunately some people do. But you know, to go there rather than scare people, I would really rather go with that story of going in and finding all those you know, the earth spirits, the earth sprites there, the little mischievous you know, that are hiding there. How do you feel about earth sprites and sort of fairies and sort of that other world? Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, personally, I certainly believe in it. I've experienced it many times within, you know, my work, as I'm sure you would have too, Jackie, within your work. And I believe that some of these locations, some of our hauntings are not as a, you know, as a result of, you know, spirit attachment, that sometimes we come along and suddenly we've put a building on top of their kingdom.
Yes.
And you know, there you are, you're in your own dimension, you are quite happy, you know, within your own world there, and you know, we come along and suddenly we plonk a building slap bang on your kingdom, and you're going to be pretty peeved off, aren't you? If that's happened. And of course that energy is going to seep up through the fabric of the building. So you know, I think a lot of the hauntings we sometimes experience, especially when we believe it to be slightly more malevolent, can be as a result of, you know, the nature spirits and the spirits that we hear of that are more folklore, you know, or we believe to be kind of more folklore, and we don't give them enough kind of precedence sometimes, and we just go straight for the obvious. That has to be a demon. You know, and sometimes the simplest explanation is you know, is a lot closer to home.
Well, it's like just quickly going back to Dracula, it's sort of like, I mean, everybody thinks of him as demonic and terrible and horrible. And, you know, one wonders if he ever existed. I know there was Vlad the Impaler that apparently existed. And I just have a vision of, not to put Americans down at all if you're watching, because you're just south of me here, where I'm sitting. So you can come and get me if you want. But I can see Americans coming into the castle and just going, okay, so where's Dracula? Show me Dracula. And that's sort of annoying.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, to put a different twist on it, you know, the castle, I can't remember the history, but the castle has been there for, you know, a very, very, very long time, 700 years kind of thing. And many people have occupied it over its duration. You know, could there have been, you know, because the Romanians believe, yes, you know, they kind of almost worship, you know, Vlad the Impaler, and they talk about him. It's common knowledge out there. The other thing about, if you go out to Romania, is that I believe it's a Catholic country, and everywhere you go, there is a church. And these churches are absolutely amazing. Even the smallest ones that you go in, and I actually visited Vlad the Impaler's, you know, not gravesite, but he's within a building. So I've lost the word that I'm looking for.
Like
when you go to so you know, so there he is inside a church himself, and you know, it was a very spiritual, you know, religious experience to go and visit where he is, far removed from anything that we've you know, ever heard about. So, you know, I'm just putting a twist on this, you know. When it comes to Dracula, did he exist in some form? If we're talking about these forest spirits, did some, and with the amount of bats that are in the area, did something possess somebody that once occupied that building? You know, did one of those spirits, and so did the story come more from that as opposed to something else? I don't know. I'm just putting my own twist on it.
Huh. But before Bram Stoker wrote the Dracula story, was the story known in Romania? Was it a folklore? No, it wasn't, was it?
No, not
but
at
we
all.
sort of transported it into our world and twisted it to make it as horrific as we
can. Now the Transylvanian, well, the Romanian tourist board, you know, it's Dracula this, Dracula that. You know, we've made, you know, everybody wants to go to Dracula's castle, and it's become very, very popular. You know, but you talk to a local about Dracula, go, huh, who, what, no. Oh yeah. That's who attracts all the tourists in. Yeah. Oh yeah, he exists. Yeah, we know all about him. Yeah.
What's the scariest place that you've been to, Paul? Whether it was an investigation or whether it's just somewhere that you visited? What are the most haunted places?
Here's again, Jackie, you know, being a spirit medium, being a soul rescuer myself, like you know, we're having to walk between those realms, and you learn to remove the element of fear out of it, because you can't walk between those realms of darkness into the light, you know, if you're going to be afraid of what you're going to encounter. So, you know, so there's probably been some very good locations that I've been to that have made me, you know, a little bit, shall we say, jumpy. One of them, and I was quite skeptical about it, was the Ancient Ram Inn here in England, in Gloucester, and heard lots about it. I'd seen all the documentaries on YouTube, and I was kind of skeptical about it, but kind of wanted to go, and I'd always resisted going. It was one place I went, do you know what, it's, you know, I'm not sure about this, and went along, and it proved me wrong. You know, we've actually got it on film. We had an enormous amount of paranormal communication, disembodied voices. The instruments that we had were either malfunctioning or reacting to our responses. And I was with another investigator, Tony Ferguson, and we was in the old barn, and he left me because one of the cameras was malfunctioning, and we've got him on camera walking out, and he's still on camera. You can see him doing something in another room or another camera. And I'm left in the old barn, and I'm talking away, and what I'm not aware of is that as I'm asking questions, I've got the disembodied voices responding back. You could hear that back. And I go over to the equipment, and I ask Spirit if they can replicate what I'm about to do by me touching the equipment. Can they then set it off? As I went to touch it, there was a massive explosion or bang or like a gunfire that went off in the barn, that only I heard. Nobody else heard it. They heard me swear, because I kind of like, you know, I didn't stay in character as the paranormal investigator, kind of going, oh, whoa, what's going on there? You know, who's that? I went, oh, fuck, and all the swear words came out of my mouth and carried on coming out of my mouth. You know, then the night just went on from there, you know, with the experiences that, you know, we had. So, yeah, I'd put the Ancient Ram Inn up there as probably one of the most haunted places that I visited. I wouldn't say the scariest, but it gave me the biggest scare, put it that way.
Yeah, and then when you look back on it, you think, wow, you do think, I mean, Spirit never failed to amaze us, do they?
Yeah.
I mean, talking about doing investigations, I mean, you've been on Jack Osborne's show, haven't you?
Yeah.
With where was that at? With the door that closed on
That was, yes, we was at a haunted fort, and we'd heard that there had been quite a lot of activity there, and we'd done a number of investigations there already, and already caught quite a lot of anomalies and things that we couldn't explain. And we brought in some CCTV cameras and set them up. And unbeknown to us, when the footage was checked, lo and behold, there was a very heavy cell door closing on its own, and you see it moving. We kind of tried to debunk it by kind of going, is there a crosswind here that is catching the door? Yeah. The door was close to the wall, so it was closed right to the door. So there is no way the wind could have got behind it, pushed it, and then moved it. And also it was very deliberate, so it wasn't like a hard slam. It was as if somebody was just very gently closing it. And we couldn't explain it. There was no draft, there was no wind that day. There was nothing that we could kind of indicate what could happen, and we couldn't replicate it. We went back again to try to film it, and it didn't happen.
Yeah,
so
see, I like that. That's what I like to do. And Michael's the same, you know, if we're on an investigation.
Yeah.
We will like, okay, let's try and see. There's no window, there's no doors open, there's no windows open. Let's try and see if we just leave the door at that angle, is it just going to close naturally because you know that's how the floor lies or whatever. So it's great that you did that, and it's great that you know you had everything there, because in that particular clip that I watched, there was a door further down, and that never moved at all. That
door didn't move, and there was another door. What you can't see in the film, there's another door behind that, and that door did lead outside, but it was closed. So that door was closed. Then the door you could see in the film was open, ajar, and then you come down the corridor and you had the cell door. So there was as you said, that other door didn't close. If there was a draft coming through, technically that door should have closed as well, but
it should.
no, it didn't.
Because they were heavy. America, now you have been you've done platform work in America, haven't you?
I have, yes. So one of the few British mediums to serve on the Golden Gate. I think it's the Temple of Light. Is it the Golden Gate Spiritualist Church in San Francisco? So I was taken out there with some other people, other mediums, and so twice I went out there. You know, we was doing workshops, readings, demonstrations. So thoroughly good time.
Did you find that you had to deliver things differently? You know, because the audience in America, I'm only asking because my husband's American, and and I know that, you know, sometimes when I'll say something, he'll go and he'll look at me as if to say, what do you mean by that? You know, and other things he'll say to me, and I'll be like, are you being funny or what? So it's like how you deliver things, because how we deliver things here in the UK, particularly with the spiritualist churches, is different, isn't it? It's a different way. How did you find that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, you know, there's going to be variations in the language, in what we would say versus what they would say, as you just said, Jackie, and vice versa. So occasionally there might be the odd misinterpretation of how I understood something coming across to maybe how Spirit was trying to get it across, to how the sitter was understanding me getting those words across. So, but it's the same with any language. You know, quite often when somebody would come through from Spirit, and maybe this has happened to yourself, Jackie, that when their natural language wasn't even English, and they're speaking to you in maybe Spanish or some other language, Eastern European, and now you're trying to interpret them. The fun one I always find is Chinese, when you get a Chinese person coming through and you're trying to interpret that one. That's always an interesting one. But so it's very much in the same way. If you're feeling the information, because you know, Jackie, we're not talking to them in the same way. There's a misconception that we're talking to Spirit and we can hear every word that they're saying and we can just reel it off. I wish it was that easy. It's not. You know, we're feeling and sensing memory links that don't belong to us. And we're trying to get those memory links across in a way that the person that we're talking to is going to remember or going to understand. So yeah, so being out in America, you know, so like with any language, there would be you know, some misinterpretations. The interesting thing that, I mean, obviously I was mainly based in California. What struck me though, and I don't know whether this was spirit just because maybe they felt I could handle it, I don't know. I was shocked by the amount of parents that came to see me that had lost a child, or when I say a child, I mean, you know, really only a teenager, or maybe, you know, someone just in the early 20s with gang related issues, whether that was through gun warfare or knife warfare, and that really kind of shook me a little bit. I wasn't expecting that, but it was almost like every other person that was coming to see me had lost a child in that way, and that, you know, that shocked me a little bit because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, but I mean, that is horrific, because looking at the news today, I think this weekend in Chicago alone, just Chicago, and that's not a big, it is a big city, but it's not huge. There were 33 gun casualties.
Wow, gosh.
Like, you know, I mean, I know growing up in England, you know, with the police and everything, you know, if they said, if you were running somewhere and the copper shouted out, "Stop," well, you'd stop.
Yeah.
They don't do that in America.
No.
No.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It's a challenging one, but on an interesting level from you know, a medium's point of view, is that, you know, when I was over there, as I just said to you, the vast majority of the sitters that were coming through had lost someone in that way. Here in the UK, I actually find the highest percentage, especially in males of a similar age, is obviously not through gang related issues. However, it's through suicide. Because especially at the beginning of the pandemic, quite a few people said to me, not meaning this in a disrespectful way, but I bet you're going to be busy, you know, the amount of people that are going to lose someone through this pandemic. And I said, not necessarily. I said, the people that are going to come to see me because they've lost somebody through the pandemic is going to be very small. I can tell you now, the highest percentage will be young men that have taken their lives. And exactly it, throughout the pandemic, if a young person has gone to spirit, it hasn't been through COVID, it's because they've taken their own life.
Wow.
So,
well, when you were on the Golden Gate Bridge though, Paul, like, for example, you talk about suicide, there's a lot of people that do a jump over that bridge. Did you feel any of that?
Yeah, I mean, driving across it, no. I had heard that it was one point where a lot of people do decide to take their life. I tend to look at it this way, Michael, you know, that unless I'm being specifically asked either by spirit or by a person, if there is a place, perhaps such as the Twin Towers, Golden Gate Bridge, or some other place that has significantly a loss of life, I don't go there. I won't go there. I want to put my toe in the water to feel that. We know what's happened. We know what goes on. So unless I'm being specifically asked, I just have a rule that I go, no, those kind of places, you know, I don't want to put my toe in the water. I don't want to step into that energy and feel something that I don't need to feel just because I can experience it. You see what I mean?
Have you found that through the pandemic that people have become more aware? Have you had more people coming to you who maybe have they want to know more about this kind of thing, or they want to learn how to heal?
Yeah. I mean, certainly one of the things that's happened is that, you know, all across the world, especially in the early stages, people had to step out of their 9-to-5 jobs and the stress of life, and all they could do was just sit indoors or sit in their gardens and do gardening or decorating or clear the cupboards out even. All the things that they wouldn't normally do, they were now doing, spending time with the family, relaxing. It's natural that once suddenly you then reconnect with yourself, once you reconnect with yourself, you're going to reconnect with the earth energy, and then you're going to reconnect to spirit. And of course, once you reconnect to spirit, then your mind, your consciousness is going to expand and open up, and you're going to start to look at your reality slightly differently, or experience your reality slightly differently. So yes, the amount of people that were coming and saying, I'm now having these experiences and I've never had them before. Can you help me? Can you talk me through them? Because, you know, I don't know what's going on, or I'm experiencing activity in my home and I've never experienced this before. So, yeah, you know, if we're talking about a mass awakening from that perspective, there certainly was, because you have to look at it as, imagine, the best way I describe it very quickly is your car. Your car's not going anywhere without a battery. However, if you put the red lead on your battery, you're going to get lots of sparks. Car's not going to go anywhere, but you're going to get lots of sparks. Yeah. Eventually you damage your battery anyway. If you put the earth lead on, first, and tighten it, then the red lead, you've got the perfect connection to the earth and to spirit. And that's exactly the way we are. So that's why sometimes we become a little bit unbalanced in life, is because that red lead is firmly on and we're sparking up and we're connected to spirit more than we realize, but we haven't got the connection to ourselves or the earth. And with the pandemic, what happened was that reversed the process, where everybody's emotions got a chance to settle down a little bit. And they stopped sparking up through life, and they reconnected to themselves and the earth. And so suddenly they got that, more people got that grounding. And then as the red lead went on the battery, we suddenly got a balance. And that's when suddenly they became more open to spirit and spiritual occurrences around them.
Well, I think that, I mean, the pandemic still is very, very bad. Over here, it's in the US, it's really, really picking up with the Delta variant. But I felt in the summer that the peacefulness of people and the way people were more open to each other was like a really good thing. And I think if there's something good that came out of this COVID situation, I think that's it, that people are really reconnecting themselves and connecting with others.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, you know, if we look at it from, you know, and I'm not talking about loss of life here, if we look at it from a different angle, the planet needed to heal. And she couldn't while we are all in our cars, while industry is running. So from that perspective, the planet got to partially heal. And I think we saw that in nature. I live on an island, and, you know, we had a wonderful summer here last year, and the island, you would have thought, even though it's very picturesque here, you would have thought that you was kind of in the Caribbean somewhere, you know, the blue, clear seas, the fish were coming up to the shoreline, there was no boats, there was no planes going over. And, you know, and I'm sure it's the same in America, but certainly here in the UK, didn't we, Jackie? We saw, you know, places where the wildlife were coming out of the forest, out of the woods, and coming into the towns. And it was amazing to watch. And I think from that perspective, certainly, you know, us humans being back inside for a little while certainly helped the planet to heal and you know, progress in that way, and especially for the ozone layer to heal and pollution to, you know, be eradicated for a little while.
It's fantastic, you know, and healing is so powerful. You teach others to heal, don't you, Paul? So
I have my own development classes, And I've got 2 development classes. So how I've set them up, and I've been teaching for about 17 years continuously now. What I call the beginners intermediate, I class that as living with sensitivity. So it's open to anybody coming to join me, and we cover basically getting to know you. So people come and they get to know themselves. They get to learn how to live with their own sensitivity. And the whole idea is not going and learning how to connect with spirit, but learning how to connect with themselves in the first place. From there, once we've got that battery terminal, as I was talking about earlier on, connected, and they start to heal, self-heal, then as the connections open up, then we can start to look at spirit. And that's when I might move them into my more advanced class, where it's all about communication with spirit, where then we're learning how to really define those links and open those links to spirit and make stronger connections there.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, it does make total sense. It's like, I always refer to it, it's like building a house. You've got to put the footings in first before you build the structure. So you know, and learning about yourself, it's a spiritual journey, and lots of people come to me, as they will to you as well, not just to you know, learn how to communicate with spirit, but because they've got lots of different things going on, or they want to try and understand where they are in life right now. So that part is very, very important, to learn about their own energy, because you can't gauge other energy if you don't know what your own is like, where that boundary is, how it settles.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Jackie. You know, as I often say to people, is that how can you do this for someone else if you can't do it for you? So if you're not going to go on your own healing journey and your own journey of transformation, how can you take somebody else on a journey of transformation and healing? So, you know, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that this work has many mirrors. It has many paths, and at the end of those paths have many mirrors. So at some point, you always get to look back at yourself and reflect back on yourself. And, you know, sometimes we don't want to look in those mirrors, do we? So we get a sledgehammer and we smash them up.
I like that.
But it's all part of the healing process and the progression moving forward, especially where we are at this present moment in life.
Yeah.
Well, I love that analogy, but it also makes me think of in Canada, the native people, you know, the original First Nations. I mean, they go on spirit quests by themselves and confront whatever demon or whatever they have. And the native people of most countries seem to be more understanding of this than the, you know, the workaday people that, you know, that go to London or Manchester or whatever. And I wonder if that's because the native people have just a long history of honoring the earth and honoring and believing things that happen around them. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, I've visited many countries around the world. And, you know, so when you look at the Maori culture, the Aborigines, the many tribes in the Amazon, you know, Brazil, so Central America, down into South America, and you look at Peru also, and as well as in North America, Canada as well, with the Native Americans, you know, they have maintained that sense of identity, as in, I know my ancestors, I know where I've come from, I know I'm connected to the earth, and I know I'm connected to much more than just what's around me. And unfortunately, in the Western world, I think that's where we've lost it a little bit, isn't it? We've got consumed by consumerism. And sometimes we've lost our own identity, you know, believing that we've got to go out there and do that 9-to-5 job. We've got to go out there and earn X amount of money. We've got to have that car. We've got to have that house. We've got to have something else. without realizing that actually we don't need any of it, and everything that we actually need is already within us. And you know, so those native cultures, you know, in the African culture as well, they've maintained those links with the spirit world. And so, you know, part of, you know, my work, not only with my own sitters, but within, you know, my work with my students as well, is trying to get people back in touch with the ancestors, because once we get in touch with the ancestors, we can learn a lot about ourselves, and we can learn a lot about our own healing as well. So, you know, and obviously, you know, many of these cultures are very much in touch with their ancestors. You know, the ancestors are a very, very important part of the journey, because the spirit world, you know, and the physical world are still very interwoven. A lot of people believe that, you know, once we die, that's it, we pass over. Maybe we believe that there's an afterlife, but we believe in the separation. There isn't. Every world is interwoven into the next world. And, you know, when you look at the healing aspect, very, very quick story, guys, if you don't mind, just to give an example of this. A young lady came to see me once, and she'd been to see many psychotherapists, and because she had very negative thoughts, very suicidal tendencies, and despite having 2 young children of her own, she continued to try to take her own life, and nobody was able to get to the root cause or was to help her. And somebody that she knew had been to see me, and they said, look, why don't you just go to see Paul? He might be able to help you, knowing the way I worked. And so straight away, when I was with her, I recognized this was ancestral. This is all to do with spirit. This isn't anything to do with the earth plane or anything psychological that's going on. And I brought her father through, and her father was able to help in assisting in healing her. And I kept in touch with her for many, many years after. And she said after that reading, she never, ever attempted to commit suicide. The reason why she wanted to take her own life is because she spent her whole of her childhood watching her father be emotionally and physically abusive to her mother. And then all of a sudden he died of a heart attack. And, you know, suddenly they were disconnected from that. He died. In their mind, he's got away with it. And so, you know, emotionally, psychologically, it affected, it really traumatized her. And it was only by bringing her father back down from the afterlife and bridging that gap and taking her on a very powerful journey. I mean, he took it out of her, it took it out of me, but he was able to close the gap that was missing within her own healing. And once he'd come through to say, I'm sorry, I apologize for everything I put you through, it was enough for her. And unfortunately, that's what happens is when we lose someone, when there is trauma between 2 people, you know, we believe that's the end of it, but actually it's not. It's still very much interwoven, and it's still, that link is still very much alive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, and you've helped to heal him as well, because he needed that to progress in spirit. So it was a joint thing. She needed it, but he needed it just as much. So and, you know,
as you might know yourself, Jackie, you know, sometimes you have to be strong with people. And you know, the amount of times when similar situations have happened and the sitter has gone, no, I don't want to speak to them, no. And I'm going, right, I'm not going to ask you to speak to them, okay, but I'm going to challenge your mind a little bit, because if they've come through, we've got an opportunity to heal. Now, you're going to have to say to me, do you want to heal this part of your life? If you don't, I'm going to let that communicator go, and they're going to understand. If you're open, I'd like to take you on the journey. You know, and then you leave it down to them. If they're open to that healing process, then they're allowed the communication to take place. If they're not, then they'll say, no, I really don't feel ready to go on that journey yet.
What can people expect from you in the future? What have you got in the pipeline for us, Paul?
At this point, you're probably going to expect me to talk about, a latest television show or, all the major events that I'm doing. I'm actually not. What people can expect from me is, as we progress forward, is that whoever is with me on my journey, we are going to be going much more on a deeper healing journey, a journey of exploration about ourselves, helping people to understand their place in, let's say, the universe, and to be able to understand that, we are connected to all things around us. And that's kind of the journey that I'm excited about. Nothing to do with, any kind of commercial events or anything like that's coming up. I can see where Spirit are taking me. I'm fully on board. I'm really excited about the idea. And then from there, we will see what opportunities open up, what doors open up as I go along, the path of, as I say, taking people on that journey of healing, transformation.
It's so important right now.
Mediumship.
It is so important right now.
Absolutely.
It really is. I mean, it's always important, but particularly now. You have a beautiful spiritual studio there, Paul. How can people find you?
So if people want to find me, they can come to my website, is the best place. I am on social media, so they can find me on social media. However, best place is come to my website, www.paulceselle.com, and that links up to all of my social media anyway. And you can learn more about me just by coming to my website. And so you can see some of the videos that we've spoken about as well.
And if you go to Paul's website, he has said, obviously it's his name, he pronounced it correctly, but it's the beginning of it is a C, so don't get frustrated.
Canadians and Americans spell it with an S. It's not, it's actually C, so begins with a C.
Good point. And on that point, we'll say thank you so much, Paul, for joining
you're more
us
than welcome.
today.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
No, thank you. It's been very, very enlightening, and it's fascinating and we only touched the tip of your experiences.
We need you back on again another time. That's what we need to do.
Whenever you want to, please just give me a shout. I would love to come back on. It's been lovely chatting to you guys and very enlightening. And you said, Michael, we've just touched on the tip of the iceberg of where we could go with today's topics.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we shall love you and leave you for now and say thank you and wish you all the best, Paul.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Bye.